Today is Friday, July 4th, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. It is Independence Day in America. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done that already. We'd appreciate that. You can leave a rating, all that good stuff. Helps us get noticed by other folks in the podcast sphere. We'd appreciate that. You can email us too, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. That's our email address, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Joining me today to get through all the news that's going on in the world today, CBN's Billy Hallowell, Trey Goins-Phillips. A lot as always on the focus story. We've got someone taking some action against Bath and Body Works over misgendering claims.
Yeah, this is an interesting story. A woman who claims she was fired over the gender issue. So we'll get into the details on that one.
All right, looking forward to the details there in just a moment. On the main thing, liberty is not just our history, it's our duty. CBN's Brody Carter's in Colonial Williamsburg on this July 4th with more on that. That's all coming up. Make sure you subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts if you haven't already. Newsmakers, Faith and Culture, Navigating Trump 2.0, Heaven Meets Earth. Great podcast offerings from CBN News. Make sure you're checking those out. You can find the links to subscribe to those in the description of this podcast episode. And we put them in there. Make it handy for you. In each and every Quick Start episode, you can find them there. All right, we're going to head to the news now in 90 seconds. And Haiti's capital is on the brink of collapse here as gangs continue to tighten their grip. A dire new warning from the UN says the nation is closer to the brink than ever. Armed gangs now hold approximately 90% of Port-au-Prince, expanding into once peaceful areas in the south and along key eastern border crossings. A new UN report says political chaos, corruption, and competing ambitions have paralyzed Haiti's leaders, handing gangs more power and money. The U.S. warns Americans not to travel there as kidnappings and attacks surge. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has attached terrorist labels to two of Haiti's biggest gangs to cut off their cash flow. And Paramount has agreed to hand over $16 million to settle a lawsuit brought by President Trump, who claims CBS's 60 Minutes edited an interview with Kamala Harris to help her during the 2024 election. Trump alleged the segment misled voters about Harris's remarks on the Israel-Hamas war, calling it election interference. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. And, you know, there's so much news going on, guys. I didn't want to let this CBS 60 Minutes settlement just go completely unnoticed, because we've criticized and talked about the state of the media often here on this podcast. And it's incredible because CBS, I don't know if you've seen the same thing, guys, in the fallout from this. A lot of people from CBS and in that sphere, the Brian Stelters of the world, they don't think CBS did anything wrong. And I find that amazing because I don't know if you guys remember the clip, but if you watch it, people have played the side-by-sides where Kamala Harris sort of fumbles through an answer about the Israel-Hamas situation, doesn't really say anything of note. And then when they edited it, it looked like a very crisp, firm, solid response because they just took like the ending of what she had said after probably a couple minutes and then made it just that. And that's in the middle of a campaign. And that's campaigning. That is not news reporting. Yes, you can edit pieces, you can edit interviews for clarity and stuff like that. But when one of the main critiques of the opponent is that they're rambling and not making a lot of sense on things, you just can't do it. And it looks like the court agreed.
Every issue the media is experiencing right now, the lack of trust, all these things are a direct result of a refusal to even say, oh, maybe we made a mistake. Oh, maybe we had blinders on. Oh, maybe that wasn't the right move. That's actually called humility. And so it's really a pride problem that the media has. So yeah, this is color me surprised. I am not surprised at all by this.
Well, I think a lot of it too is nobody would bat an eye if it was like, well, they do it with both sides, right? But they will jump to a conclusion about the right, and use words in headlines about like Republicans pounce on or Republic, whatever, any negative verb that they can attach in a headline to conservatives is the verb you're going to see in the headline. So there's that, and then their coverage obviously skews generally more to the left, and then stuff like this, they're willing to carry some water for a Democrat and say that it was just edited for clarity. That was the reason, but they're not going to do any favors for a conservative, and they're certainly not going to do any favors for Trump. We all know that Trump, for all of whatever strengths he has, he also rambles. Like, that is just part of his brand. He rambles and rambles and rambles, and the media will let him run with it the whole time. They don't edit him for clarity. So, you
Right.
see them doing a favor one way, and they don't do the favor in the other direction ever.
Yeah, and it's incredibly frustrating to watch it unfold, and it's a miracle there's anyone with any trust left in the media at all. But we're doing our best here at CBN News to report the truth. And like you said, Billy, I think the key thing is we know we're going to make mistakes. And we all know as humans, we're fallen and we have biases. And so what you have to do is just be upfront about it. We are a Christian network and we are coming at things from a Christian worldview. And so that's how we're going to see things.
I want to address that before we go here on this, because this is really important. I actually think people would trust the media much more if they knew what they were getting into, if they knew that who the people were, what they believe, what lens they were looking through, right? We look through a Christian lens. That's who we are. So you know what you're getting when you come to us. Therefore, you can trust more, I believe. I actually, look, if I'm watching MSNBC or Fox News, I know the lens through which they are looking at things politically. I understand it. I comprehend it. When you're pretending you don't have a lens, when you do, that is when the trust is eroded. And that's just an important thing I wish they would understand in the mainstream media.
Yeah. And then to your point, just show the humility when you make a mistake. That would go a long way. If you said, you know what, we messed up on this, but they don't seem to do that. They just seem to double down and say, nope, we were right, and try to find a way to dig into quote unquote their side and just give them some red meat to latch onto instead of just admitting they were wrong on something. And we're seeing all these news networks lose lawsuits. How many millions of dollars are these networks going to lose in this battle? It's just over politics. It's insane that they're going to keep going that way. And hopefully some of these settlements will teach these networks, hey, we need to stop doing this, even if it's just for the bottom line that motivates them back into some level of sanity. I mean, I think we'd all like to see that, but we're going to head to the focus story now. As Billy was talking about there at the top of the podcast, a woman taking action against Bath and Body Works over the claim that she was fired for misgendering a fellow employee. It's crazy this is even still going on, but tell me what's going on here with this story.
Well, and it's like, with these stories, we never have all the details. You only have one side often. But this is an interesting scenario. As you said, this woman is claiming that Bath and Body Works, she was a manager at one of the locations in Utah. She worked there for 3 years, I believe. And she was reportedly fired, according to the First Liberty Institute. This is a conservative legal firm, for, quote, refusing to adhere to the company's pronoun policy because of her religious beliefs. She is a Mormon and holds to traditional beliefs on gender. And so attorneys filed a charge of discrimination on her behalf with the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. That's the EEOC. And we had a chance to talk with Stephanie Taub. She's the senior counsel for First Liberty, and she is pledging to push back against what she sees as an illegal move by the company. She told me that she was a store manager, Jocelyn Bowden, the woman at the center of this, for over 3 years. And when a transgender employee started to work at the store, Jocelyn treated her well, treated her like everyone else, was willing to use names or nicknames. But the only problem is she could not use pronouns in a way that was inconsistent with her religious and moral beliefs. And because of that, there was an HR complaint that was filed, and she was immediately, according to the attorney, investigated and fired.
And so what is First Liberty now saying about this case?
They're saying that they believe they have a real strong case here. One of the interesting things, in order to get in front of a federal court, when it comes to employment matters, you have to file, a complaint with the EEOC. That's how it works. This is a federal body that governs employment practices in America. And so they went to the EEOC in hopes that they can get this case, if they need to, in front of a federal court. And they are defending her very strongly. And they're saying, look, Bath & Body Works should have found a way to respect all of its employees and to figure out a way to live up to its ideals of inclusivity and tolerance. And they said a simple solution would have been to just let Jocelyn use names instead of pronouns, or even allow her to use names consistent with her religious beliefs or pronouns consistent with her religious beliefs. So basically they're saying they should have found a middle ground approach that would have served everyone.
And so you have this lawsuit now. How is Bath & Body Works responding to this?
Yeah, this is interesting. So I reached out to them, and when it comes to a case like this, they are very careful about what they say. They usually avoid getting specific. I got a spokesperson sending me a statement back, and I'm going to read it because it's brief. Bath & Body Works complies with all laws concerning employment practices. As an equal opportunity employer, we do not discriminate in our management of our associates on the basis of any protected status. So they're basically saying we've done nothing wrong. Any protected status, whether that's a religious status, whether that's now, again, we don't know all the details of this case. We have one side. Bath & Body Works is not really giving us the other side, if there is one. So we can only go based on what we have here. And we've reached out to all parties, and that's what we've been told.
It's July 4th here, and I just can't help but think of the founding fathers of America. I live near Washington Crossing, Pennsylvania, and so every July 4th we go over there and we watch them read the Declaration of Independence. And so we think about the Battle of Trenton, where Washington and his men in the dead of winter made it across an icy river and then walked, some of them barefoot, down to a battle in the middle of winter as they're all dying of different diseases and frostbite and everything else. And then you have a story like this here, some 249 years later, of someone complaining about the pronoun someone's using for their name and going to court over this. And I just wonder, guys, if there's going to be sinkholes or something from all the founders rolling over in their graves so many times that the ground just falls out. I mean, this is insane when I look at this stuff. I mean, even, when there was confusion, when all the woke stuff started happening in the beginning, you kind of think, okay, maybe some people were trying to be nice. It's still going on. I cannot believe people are still going along with this. Am I the only one that's in that boat?
No, I mean, we're in the upside down. We're trapped in it, and we've almost escaped. We can see through the glass ceiling that we're almost out, but we're still stuck under it.
Well, and I think the frustrating logistical thing with stories like this Bath and Body Works story is that so much of this happens on a local level, right? At one branch or one store. And then by the time it works its way up through the system and the statements have been polished and repolished by everybody at corporate, you never actually get a full, complete understanding of these situations until they work themselves through the court system. And then at that point, the damage is already been done culturally, right? Because the media is going to jump on it and do whatever they can to make the conservative Christian view look as ridiculous as they possibly can. And it's like, oh, well, we've already moved on by the time this actually is kind of adjudicated and figured out. So it's important for outlets like CBN to be covering them, because there are going to be few outlets that are covering these situations fairly. So I know that this is one that we'll be sure to follow up on and continue to keep our ears and eyes on.
Yeah, absolutely. Billy, final thoughts on this one?
Yeah, look, we've got to continue to pray for sanity, because we joke that we're almost through that ceiling of insanity, but, we're not quite there. And if these details are true, and this is what happened, look, everyone deserves to be respected. What you don't deserve to do is to mandate that other people participate in untruths. That is something you don't have the ability to do that. And so we've got to come to a place of rationality on these issues in this country. That's all.
Yeah. No, it's a fair point, and definitely worth monitoring these things, because it is important to know where things are going in the country, so that we can deal with these. Because if it doesn't get to your neck of the woods now, it will get to it eventually. So best be prepared on how to respond to anything that might come our way. But appreciate you bringing that one to the podcast today. And we are going to head over to the main thing now. And every year on the 4th of July, America, of course, celebrates our freedom. But in Colonial Williamsburg, they live it out. Brody Carter shows us how Thomas Jefferson's words and his spirit still echo through the streets there as a reminder that liberty is more than just history, it's our duty today. That's today's main thing.
As the largest living history museum in the world, Colonial Williamsburg is a snapshot of America's founding. It's where history is relived every day, a place where we can learn and understand who we were and who we're still becoming.
I think a lot of times we ask questions about history because we're trying to understand ourselves, and history can be kind of a safe mirror to not just investigate the past, but investigate who we are as a people.
Step back in time to the 18th century, when colonists fought for freedom from British rule, pursuing the radical idea that people should govern themselves.
Freeze and fire!
Yet, even as Jefferson championed liberty, the contradiction of slavery remained. Today, his legacy and its complexities still walk these streets.
Good day. Good morning.
And this man still stands at the forefront of the story as author of the Declaration of Independence, Virginia's second governor, and later, America's third president.
What does your shirt say? Land of the free because of the brave. Are you brave?
With a team of more than 1,000 reenactors, 89 original buildings, and some 60 million archaeological artifacts, Colonial Williamsburg turns the past into a place you can walk and experience today.
We are accurate down to the stitch. Everything you need to run an 18th century city, almost everything, we have actively running here in 2025. If you look at John Trumbull's painting, his portrait of the Continental Congress, you will see Jefferson wearing this.
The man behind the wig is Curt Smith, an actor from Arkansas who spent years performing and teaching theater across the country. That was until he found his calling a decade ago.
Superstitions and chains of bondage fade like mist in the morning. When we educate the people in this country.
After 10 years in the role, it's hard to tell where Curt ends and Jefferson begins.
I don't know if Jefferson ever really leaves me. It's strange, you know, when you learn a second language and they say you're fluent when you start dreaming in the language. Yeah. I think the last dream I had was in '76, and I was him, and we were in Philadelphia, and I think we were walking towards the Pennsylvania State House.
In real life, Curt Smith may be far from 1776, but in spirit, he's walked every step. Of the 50,000 letters we still have from Thomas Jefferson, Curt has read them all. And with more than a dozen original programs written for modern audiences, he breathes new life into the Founding Father, one story, one stage at a time.
This is the most important job that I've ever had. And there's not a day that goes by, and that's not hyperbole, there's not a day that goes by that I don't feel the honor of putting on these clothes and getting to say these words.
And when he speaks those words that helped give birth to our nation, the past feels close enough to touch.
Publish and declare that these united colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states.
We've been coming for over 40 years and about once or twice a year.
I just think about that the whole time I'm driving here, going through the mountains and everything, about how blessed I am and how fortunate I am to just live in this country.
John Schmidt drives 700 miles from Ohio twice each year for a chance to walk through history and remember what freedom cost.
Thomas Jefferson lived in a time of revolution, and talking to the man who portrays him every day, not much has changed.
You, in 2025, are negotiating with troubles within balance of power. You are negotiating foreign wars. You are negotiating equitable or unequal rights. I don't change a single word, but it hits people differently because of what we are experiencing in our current lives. I think that's pretty cool.
As we gather once again to celebrate the 4th of July, our independence from the British Empire and the right to self-govern, we're invited to once again ask ourselves, what does it really mean to be American?
Jefferson was a pre-romantic writer. His writings, the Declaration of Independence, my God, that thing is full of hope, isn't it? But let's not forget it's also a declaration of war. That declaration, with every word he writes, 100 men die. And he knows that. But he doesn't end with that. He ends with hope. So what I try to do with my conversations, if the audience leaves with questions and hope, then I can go to bed that night and think maybe I did an okay job.
Jefferson's words still echo across the centuries, challenging each generation to defend freedom seek truth, and uphold the promise of we the people. In Williamsburg, Virginia, Brody Carter, CBN News.
All right, Brody, thanks for that report there. Really appreciate it. And that's going to leave us with time for one last thing on the podcast today. And before we get to the verse, since it's July 4th and it's a holiday here, every July 4th, guys, there's probably one or two things that we all love about it, just like, especially looking at history. And one of the ones that I love is John Adams' letter to Abigail Adams on July 3rd, 1776, when they just voted for independence. John Adams then writes this letter to his wife, and he says, I'm apt to believe that it'll be celebrated, meaning this day, by succeeding generations as the great anniversary festival, ought to be commemorated as the day of deliverance by solemn acts of devotion to God Almighty. Whoa, you mentioned God in there? That's crazy. It ought to be solemnized with pomp and parade, with shoes, games, sports, guns, bells, bonfires, and illuminations. I mean, it's just, what an incredible letter there. And we look at now, we're doing that and still doing this 249 years later. And I just love that letter. It blows me away every time. I don't know what you guys, if there's like a little nugget or something like that that stands out to you every July 4th.
I think the fact that the Declaration itself, referenced God. They went out of their way to find that power came not from man, but from God. I think there's 4 different references, right, to the Almighty in some way. That's notable, right? That's in a world where the king, the king got his power from God in his mind, but kind of looking at, Saul and above in scripture and after Saul. But the reality of it, again, these rights coming from God, I think that's pretty cool to reflect on.
Yeah, Freedom from Religion Foundation would have hated the founders if they were around back then.
Yeah, no, totally. Look, I think for all of our shortcomings and all the things that we talk about on this podcast that we still have not gotten right as a nation, I think, on July 4th especially, I will just never not be proud to be an American and to live in the country that we live in, because we have an incredible country founded on Judeo-Christian biblical ideas, and we've been a success for 249 years, and that's worth celebrating and thanking the Lord for.
Yes, no more apology tours for the past actions of America. Let's wear that flag loud and proud to be an American. All right, now to the Bible verse, the actual one last thing here, and I thought it would be appropriate to have John 8:36. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. And so, yes, we're celebrating our freedoms that we have in here in America, and we love those. But the reminder that true freedom can only be found in Christ.
I've got nothing to add. That is 100% the message. That is what we need to remember every day, all day.
Yeah, I mean, as awesome as our freedoms are in America, as you said, Dan, it's the freedom in Christ that is the ultimate and only true freedom.
All right, that's as good a spot as any to end it this week on the Quick Start Podcast. As always, make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. And Lord willing, and that creek don't rise up on us, we'll be back here on Monday with more. Enjoy a fantastic holiday weekend.